And I'm Brent Everman.
Yes.
I'm a senior technical account manager here at AWS, and I also have Matt with me. I'll allow him to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Matt Pavlik. I'm the Director of Information Security at Fetch Rewards, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Fetch and about our journey after Brent kind of introduces the SIP program.
All right, thank you, Matt. And so here's the agenda that we're going to cover today. We're going to give you a little bit of an overview about the Security Improvement Program, or as like we call it, SIP. And then why Fetch decided to engage in the SIP program, and now how now that they've engaged in it, what value Fetch is achieving from the SIP and the ability to achieve its goals, and then some of the lessons that we've learned along the way of when we are engaged in the SIP program. And so, we'll start off. If you haven't heard about the SIP program before, I want to give you a little bit of an overview, kind of so you understand what it covers and what the process is. And so the Security Improvement Program, or SIP as we call it, is it's really evaluating your environment and your people, process, and technology against 300 plus security best practices. And so this is service and partner neutral. And these best practices are derived from industry accepted standards such as CIS, NIST, the AWS Foundational Security Best Practices, as well as our field learnings from customers. And so in the SIP process, we'll uncover gaps and also identify improvement opportunities and best practices that your teams can implement to secure your cloud journey. And the SIP program evaluates across 5 different domains that are listed here on the right side: IAM, detection, infrastructure, data protection, and then incident response and automation. And so now that you understand what the SIP program is about, what does what does the process look like? And so there's multiple phases here in the SIP program. And so if you haven't had an introduction, with your TAM before, I would recommend getting, and setting up an introduction with them to learn a little bit more about it and how you could leverage it within your organization. And after that introduction, a baselining session is conducted. And this is where the SIP champion, your TAM, as well as team members from the customer side, we want to get a variety of perspectives. So security, DevOps, architecture, are in those baselining sessions, evaluating your current environment against those 300 plus security best practices. And those different perspectives allow, kind of a discussion around the trade-offs and why decisions were made, whether if those, to around those best practices. And then once that baselining session is done, we'll strategize internally, the SIP champion and the TAM, to identify the highest risk and security gaps in the customer's environment, as well as establish a score across each of those 5 domains, plus an overall security score. And that will result in an executive readout where we provide those targeted and prioritized recommendations to you, so you can help to make informed decisions to mitigate those risks. And so, once you have that readout, as well as what we call a prioritized action plan, you'll take that back and begin to work on those internally. And how we normally recommend with the working the customer do this, and how we've been working this with Fetch, is do this in a very iterative fashion. And so like kind of a sprint by sprint basis, where you take off a chunk of them, the most critical ones, and you implement those. And your TAM is there for you along the way. You can also leverage SMEs and the TAM can pull in SMEs, if you need a deeper dive on a specific service to help close the gap. And then you're continuing to improve and implement those fixes, as well as measure them. So that's something you can provide to your leadership to provide a tangible outcome. So like we've improved our security score by X, or we've used the SIP to help achieve a certification in one of the compliance frameworks. All right, now that I've walked you through the process of the SIP, I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who's going to talk a little bit about their experience with the SIP and some of the value that they gain from it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Brent. So Excited to share our experience with the AWS SIP. I will say I've been an AWS user a couple of times, and it's been really interesting to see the migration from saying like the AWS well-architected framework to something that I found a lot more valuable in terms of the distilling good action items out of it with the AWS SIP program. So as I mentioned before, I'm Matt Pavlik. I have the information security team at Fetch. And after joining Fetch in February of this year, I began building a information security program for the company's expanded ambitions. And just, maybe a little context on what Fetch is so that it'll help kind of understand some of the decisions that we made. Fetch is a business that we call a rewards platform. We drive value for our app users, and 100% of our users are accessing our services through an iOS or Android app. And these users can earn rewards by scanning receipts or engaging in other activities, and then providing proof of purchase to our partners. And our partners are some of the largest consumer packaged good companies and many other large customer-facing brands. Fetch serves tens of millions of active users daily, and the entire delivery of all of our services, our entire value is within the AWS environment. So that's everything from the backend services that support our apps to all of the reporting for our partners. At the moment, the company's offerings are entirely US based and US focused. And so many of the things that we look at from a security perspective for our compliance frameworks are US based today. So why did we decide to engage on the SIP? Well, I mentioned that I joined Fetch in February. I think the MO for any fresh look at an information security program is an assessment. And I started off with a NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 risk assessment. Uh, I actually engaged an outside party to come in and do that assessment for us. And over the course of about 45 days, they completed reviews of documentation, interviews of personnel, and came back with our risk assessment. There weren't a lot of surprises in it. We knew that there was a consequence to of many of the decisions that we've made around our rapid innovation. And but it did help to highlight that one area that we were really lacking in was in our governance, and I'll reference that in just a second. And then it also highlighted um, at a high level where some of our risks were in our cloud infrastructure. And so first, let me talk about governance, because this is another kind of piece of the puzzle that we stitched together. So on the governance side, very quickly coming out of that risk assessment, we selected a GRC tool that would integrate with our source of truth systems, AWS included, but also, Okta and our other infrastructure services. From that GRC tool, we were able to run some specific reports and tests. And those reports and tests were really helpful in terms of going from the very general risk assessment observations that we got out of the NIST CSF 2.0 to the much more tactical, here is a mapping to a control that is not in compliance with the objective of your policy and of your program. And so taking these two things, taking the NIST CSF 2.0 risk assessment and taking the results of our GRC tool, that really led to a conclusion that we needed to spend a real concerted effort on an evaluation of the cloud platform and in particular, where we should be focusing our attention for the kind of get well plan. And that was about the time that I started talking with Brent and our AWS account team. And one of the things that they shared with us was that we have this program, the SIP program, which again I had done well-architected framework in a prior life, and this seemed like a good evolution of that program. Everything that Brent mentioned in his overview, in terms of setting up that initial discussion and then working through that program, was very consistent with our experience. So first of all, why did we pick to do it? I think the first piece was it's a holistic view of everything in our AWS infrastructure. We are a digitally native cloud first company, and so just about everything related to our infrastructure is in the cloud. And so being able to get that holistic view of our environment, whether those were you know, QA, pre-prod, or prod environments, was really important to us. Taking this allowing us to position for proactive security action was really important. So yep, we have a bug bounty program. Things get reported from time to time. And I certainly worry about those, but I love getting ahead of things. And so this program would both surface where those gaps were and prioritize where we should focus our efforts. As Brent also mentioned, it aligned with the CSF framework. And so that was helpful for us as well, that the work that we had already done with our assessor could be linked to the work that we were going to do in the SIP program. It was a customized review. That was really important because we have things that are somewhat unique in our environment. We have certainly unique things that we're trying to accomplish. And so being able to work with the team ahead of time, say that we really want to make sure we're drilling in on these particular areas, either because they're areas of a known weakness or areas that we have certain objectives for. Aligning those observations with the industry best practices, and then ensuring that all of that was consistent with our regulatory and compliance goals. So we're seeking a security certification in 2025, and so part of the AWS SIP work was also part of our journey to our security certification. And then the final thing that really sealed it for us was this consultative approach. We'll talk a little bit about the time invested, I think, on the next slide here. Oh, I guess maybe I should talk about it now. So the time required for the program was significant. This is not just a case of saying, okay, here are our goals and now AWS go do. It was a consultative discussion. I want to say we had 6, probably 90-minute sessions with our AWS SMEs within the Fetch organization, and then the folks on the AWS side who were conducting the assessment. And that was really important because oftentimes the things in the assessment, you need to have a discussion of, well, what does that mean? Here's something that we're doing in our environment. Does that meet or not meet the standard? And so that was the final thing that was, I think, really the sealing the deal on this, is that it gave us a chance to have those discussions. Next slide, please. All right, so how are we leveraging SIP to achieve our goals? Well, we went through this consultation. I've described why we made the selection. I think the first thing that we did is, coming out of the assessment, we had a huge Excel sheet with literally hundreds of observations ranked with different risk ratings and priority, which was incredibly helpful and would be a lot for our leadership to digest. So the other thing we did with Brent and the team was we really customized what that readout should look like for leadership. Took it into PowerPoint, focused on those most critical items, thought about what kind of behavior did we want to incent coming out of that presentation. We presented those findings to our CTO, to our CIO, and then we prioritized the findings with our business objectives. Coming out of that meeting, we needed some commitments for prioritization and resources because many of the things would require changes in developer behavior or changes in our engineer behavior. And we got that coming out of the presentation. Then we moved into a more tactical approach. We now have a biweekly team that gets together. We review our progress and next actions. We do that independently of a regular discussion with our account team. Um, we take back from that biweekly meeting to our account team any follow-up discussions, and we work with our architect when we need specific advice. We're also integrating the findings of that into our GRC program so that we align our tests with specific findings coming out of the SIP program. And then, as I mentioned, we're engaging the AWS account team on the clarifications. As I look towards the future, I can certainly see some ongoing assessments and reviewing of the assessment that's been done so far. It's too early. We've only been at this for probably 2 months now of the tactical biweekly meetings to go back and kind of gauge progress. But I'm looking forward to that time where we can go back and take something from critical to minor or take something off the list entirely. That's everything I wanted to cover there, Brent.
All right.
And how am I doing on timing? We want to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so, I think, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You're good.
So lessons learned. I think going in, as I mentioned, it is a significant time investment. It pays dividends both on the upfront planning of the implementation and the discussions with AWS, but you need to be prepared for, in our case, it was 60 to 90-minute sessions in order to really get the value out of it. One piece that we provided some feedback on to AWS is going through the assessment. Many times it felt that there were subjective conversations that we were having, which could have been augmented with queries out of our environment, and that would have been helpful to bring in. So, for example, we have a couple dozen accounts in our AWS account structure. Not all of those are administered by the SMEs that we have on the team. And so being able to answer conclusively a question like, does a specific control exist across all of your account structures? Sometimes that could be something that could be queried ahead of time. And then that could provide the basis for the data. Um, so I think that would be one enhancement to the program, or something that, as the consumer of the program, you could do ahead of time to then bring that data in a more quantitative way to the discussion. And I think that covers it for lessons learned. I think that's my last
Yeah.
slide.
All right. Yeah.
So
Thank you, Matt. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry. Good.
yeah.
No, go ahead if you're gonna say something.
Nope.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, and that's something we're always looking for as customers go through the SIP program. Feedback so that we can take that back to the SIP team who champions it and continue to improve and build upon it. For customers who are engaging in it. So that's something we always look forward to is the feedback. And so thank you for kind of listening through the session today. Kind of as the next step, if this is the first time you're hearing about the SIP, or I've heard about the SIP before, but kind of like Matt's perspective and how they're using it, reach out to your technical account manager to get a deeper dive on it and maybe start engaging in the SIP program yourself. And I do have a QR code up here, and so please leave us feedback. We want to make sure these sessions are valuable and informative to you, and so anything that we can do better, we would appreciate that feedback on.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt and Brent, for your presentation today. Some really good suggestions here. And certainly, we will ensure to relay your feedback, Matt, to the SIP team to ensure that the queries are processed ahead of time, and so that we can spend more time on the discussion. So that's a very good feedback. I hope our other customers understood the value proposition of the security improvement program, which is exclusive for our enterprise support customers, just so you know. And with that, we've posted the link to the survey, and the QR code also can be scanned from your mobile phones. Please take a moment to provide your feedback for this presentation.